Good evening and welcome to Husband, Father, Theologian. My name is Joel Savage and I thought today, because I'm a bit behind in some of my studies, well not really, because life's a bit difficult, I thought we might listen to somebody else. So I'm going to read from a book called Here We Stand by Hermann Sasse. And in particular, the start of his book, the first part of which is entitled The Question Raised by the World Today. Chapter 1. What does it mean to be Lutheran? What does it mean to be Lutheran? When we try and answer this question in the limits of this book, we wish it to be understood that we are using the term Lutheran as a title which a church uses in referring to itself. The term is not to be taken here as a confessional designation for individuals. We are not at all concerned whether this or that individual, be he simply a parishioner or a bishop, a professor of theology or a pastor, a man prominent in public office or an obscure man of the people, calls himself Lutheran, whether or not he has a right to do so, whether he knows what he is saying, or whether he does not mean anything by it at all. We are not even interested whether or with what justification the term Lutheran can be applied to particular men of historical importance, whether and with what right, in view of the undeniable relationship between the kind of life a man lives and the confessional stamp of his church heritage, we may speak of the distinct Lutheran type of a Lutheran man. All these important and interesting questions we must leave untouched. We are quite aware of the significance of this problem as an important question of church history and of general history and culture. But we would have to refrain from discussing this problem here, even if we were able to add anything substantial or new to what has recently been written on this subject. Lutheranism, this is an abstract concept of philosophy of religion. The character of Lutheranism is scientifically determined, and it follows from the very nature of the question that the various exponents of the philosophy of religion, that the historians and philosophers of the different schools and tendencies, that the theologians of the different communions should give different answers. Not even the theologians who call themselves Lutheran agree on what the real nature of Lutheranism is. Lutheranism itself cannot provide the answer. It cannot answer the inquirer who seeks to know its nature because it is a dumb concept. But it is altogether different when we ask about the Lutheran Church. The evangelical Lutheran Church is not an idea. It is a reality. It is not dumb, but speaks. For it would not be a church if it had not borne witness, if it did not continue to bear witness, what it is particularly as a Lutheran church. It is for this reason that we are using the word Lutheran here, as a title which a church uses in referring to itself. As soon as we ask what the nature of Lutheran Christianity is, and how it has influenced the world, as soon as we raise the question as to whether a particular philosophical system has anything to do with Lutheranism, or as soon as we inquire whether the adherents of a particular theological school or tendency have an inherent right to the title Lutheran, we always get a chorus of contradictory answers in reply. For there are theologians today who emphatically reject Luther's teaching of the Lord's Supper, and yet just as emphatically claim the title Lutheran for their theology. There is no way of stopping this. In such cases, the term Lutheran cannot be guarded against misuse. In fact, there is only one case in which it bears a single, unequivocal meaning, and that is when we inquire about the Lutheran Church. For then we are not dependent on hypotheses of an intellectual history or theories of theology, but on what this church says about itself. It is, of course, still possible that the declarations of the Lutheran Church may be differently understood and expounded, but a stable basis for agreement is at least provided. At the same time, the question, what does it mean to be Lutheran, is taken out of the sphere of purely academic discussion and is given an unparalleled reality. The question about the nature of the Lutheran Church is more than one of the most burning questions in present-day Germany. Its importance extends beyond Germany and is becoming an increasingly real question throughout the world where there are Lutheran Christians and Lutheran congregations. What is the Lutheran Church? This is what the countries are asking in whose midst Lutheranism exists. In many a country, this question is connected with another. Should this church continue to be tolerated? Lutherans in Scandinavian lands, where for 4 centuries practically the entire population has belonged to the evangelical Lutheran Church, and where the bond uniting church and state seems indissoluble, can hardly imagine how their Lutheran brethren feel in Prussia, for example, where the Lutheran Church has had to struggle for its existence with a powerful state, century after century, and who, living in countries like the United States, where toleration is taken as a matter of course, can picture the predicament of our church in countries and where our brethren in the faith are opposed, as the Lutherans were in the Counter-Reformation or the Christians in the ancient church. Let no one deceive himself about the seriousness for world history and for church history of the hour in which we are living. The day of matter-of-course toleration, the day of the assured and peaceful existence of the churches, is already drawing to a close in many parts of the world. And the days of the ancient church and of the Reformation are returning. Days in which the Lord's prophecy was fulfilled. Before governors and kings shall you be brought for my sake, for a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. Under these circumstances, the Lutheran Church of the world will do well to reflect betimes on the fact that the confession of pure doctrine, which knits it together, bears the motto, I will also speak of thy testimony before kings, and shall not be put to shame. As 400 years ago, so today, once again, our church must answer the world's question, what does it mean to be Lutheran? With the joyful confession of its faith. The houses of God from whose pulpits the message of the Reformation was first heard, the old evangelical churches in Wittenberg and Torgau, in Eisleben and Erfurt, in Magdeburg and Naumburg, have not belonged to the Lutheran Church for a long time, even if the individual congregations have been allowed to retain their confessional stamp. There are more Lutheran churches today in the state of Iowa than in the province of Saxony, to which the above-mentioned cities belong. Even the altar of the city church in Wittenberg where the sacrament was first celebrated, as our catechism teaches, is no longer a Lutheran church. Reformed church members are regularly admitted to the altar there, and no one can object if the minister presents a Calvinistic interpretation of the Lord's Supper. When pilgrims from Lutheran churches throughout the world, from Scandinavian and Baltic lands, from America and Australia, visit the sites associated with Luther's career, they set their feet on the soil of an alien church. It is a church which extols Luther with lofty and even extravagant words, which has erected memorials and museums to his honour, which surrounds his memory with filial love, and which even uses his catechism. But it does all this with the reservation that the Heidelberg Catechism is also a very good little book, that, in the final analysis, it is a matter of indifference which catechism is used, because pure doctrine really does not matter anyhow. That pure doctrine, as Luther thought of it, is of little account, and that life is more important than teaching. Living piety than dead dogma is the great discovery which many Prussians and others believe represents an important advance over the Reformation. Clergymen and their congregations have been so thoroughly imbued with this view that there is no longer any doubt in men's minds that it is true. Saying that, we have already suggested that this forced mingling of confessions and this obliteration of confessional boundaries in the German church unions was not due to internal ecclesiastical necessity. Although such inner pressure, resulting from the confessional divisions, can never justify a false union, it is easy to understand how an age which is indifferent to doctrine would use it as an excuse.